Good morning, everyone. That's working. Great. Luckily, the weather calmed down a little bit, so you can hear me now. Before it was raining through, almost raining through the tent. So. All right, let's get started. So welcome everybody. This morning we'd like to discuss with all of you and also demonstrate and analyze nature-based solutions for flood resilience. This session is brought to you by the World Bank's Global Program on Nature-Based Solutions for Climate Resilience, together with our colleagues from JBA here. The World Bank's Global Program on Nature-Based Solutions is a team, a global knowledge program that works across the different groups in the World Bank, but it's housed at GFDRR, the Global Facility for Disaster Risk Reduction. And our role is really to work with the country teams of the World Bank to help them to do more and better nature-based solutions projects. So we're kind of a knowledge expert team, sorry, in the World Bank. And in our work, we work a lot on different projects with our colleagues here at JBA. So a very good partner to do this session together with them. So my name is Boris Van Zanten. I'm co-leading the global program on the World Bank side in the GFDRR. And here with us, I already mentioned we have the JBA team. So later on, we'll hear from John Bevington, who is JBA's manager of the framework contract that they have with GFDR and the World Bank to do flood risk assessments. He has a lot of experience, done about 40, 50 projects in developing countries, but also working with NGOs. His main expertise is developing risk models and geospatial software tools for disaster risk management. And then next to John, we have Joe Reed, who is also an engineer with JBA, has a lot of actually super interesting combination of experience both in the humanitarian sector and in engineering of coastal defenses. And maybe some of you have seen on the program that we were supposed to have a fourth speaker today, Catalina Ramirez, who was supposed to join us remotely from the water group in the World Bank in Buenos Aires. But unfortunately, she called in sick this morning, so I'm going to have to step in, and hopefully I have a good understanding of her talking points. But you will find out about that by the end of the session. So what are we talking about today? So, maybe many of you know that nature-based solutions are now seen globally as really a key integrative solutions to both the climate and the biodiversity crisis. But what we, in short, what it is right now is that it's time for nature-based solutions to deliver. So how do you actually develop these projects? How do you actually understand their risk reduction benefits, and how can you actually go from this idea of nature-based solutions to implementing a project on the ground? What kind of analytics do you need to do that? So that's what we're going to discuss today. So basically, we have four components in the session. So first, I'll give a very short introduction of what we are working on, nature-based solutions in the World Bank, and what our global program is doing. Then I give it over to the colleagues of JBA, which is by far the most interesting part of the session, because they're going to do some real life demonstrations. And then after that, I'll try to fill you in on some real world project examples. So how do you go from the modeling and the demo to an actual project on the ground? So that's how we'd like to structure this today. So just really briefly on like what are nature-based solutions, right? What are these? It's like kind of a buzzword. So maybe some of you are thinking, what are we talking about? So really practical from the World Bank's perspective. Many of our client countries, many emerging economies around the world, they're facing with the impacts of climate change and increasing flood risks. But these are all often not the only problems, right? So the degradation of ecosystems leads to a loss of natural capital, which is affecting lives and livelihoods of people. So often these problems go hand in hand, and nature-based solutions are meant to be an integrative solution for those combined issues. And that's maybe important to keep in mind. Also, the definition of the UN that we work with is that these solutions are supposed to both benefit kind of the risk reduction side, but at the same time also sustain ecosystem services and also have a positive impact on nature and biodiversity. So really practically, this could be, for example, urban parks that have a flood buffer, flood storage function, but at the same time provide cooling and also spaces for recreation. I think many of you have heard of mangrove projects around the world, mangrove being a promising solution for coastal protection, but at the same time storing carbon and also being an important nursing ground for many different fish species. There are several wetland projects. There's a lot of opportunity in the wetland space as well, also around urban areas, to combine the water storage function with sustaining biodiversity and creating opportunities for recreation. So just really quickly on Latin America, since we're in the region, just wanted to show a few examples from the World Bank portfolio that have been implemented or are being implemented currently. So for instance, you see this Rio Bogota project on the top right on the slide, which is a project that has been implemented over the past years with kind of a room for the river. So creating more space for the river for water storage to reduce flooding downstream in the city, but also to create spaces for recreation and to bring back certain species that have been threatened in the region. On the bottom, there's also the Belize Coastal Resilience Project, which had a component on coral reef restoration together with the communities. So just to give a bit of an idea of different types of interventions, right, that we're talking about. So you can, in an urban context, you can really think about these green infrastructure, nature-based solutions at different scales. So you can integrate them at the neighborhood level. So really small scale types of interventions like bioretention areas, river and stream renaturation, some forms of urban farming as well can bring also resilience and flood reduction benefits, but also green roofs can be a solution. Obviously, those are quite expensive solutions, so that's also something to consider, like where are you trying to develop those solutions. But it's also very important to look at the bigger scale and to integrate the bigger existing MBS that are there. So in many places, flooding downstream is caused by deforestation upstream in the watershed. So if there's ongoing deforestation upstream, it's really important to have that systems perspective as well. Well, then I think it's really important to acknowledge also from a development perspective that nature-based solutions cannot do it all. So in many places you need these great infrastructure components to bring resilience, to build flood resilience, and here you just that can be either integrated in a single solution. So you have, for instance, a bioretention area with a rain sewer integrated in the solution itself, or an integration of green and gray measures at the systems level. So you have the drainage infrastructure working together with an MBS. I won't spend too much time on this, but just saying that there is, if we look at our World Bank portfolio on nature-based solutions for climate resilience, so this is not just flood resilience projects, but also a lot of other hazards such as landslides and extreme heat. We definitely see an upward trend. So there's over 100 lending operations that have been approved over the past 10 years. And we've seen quite a strong increase in commitments over since 2018 with a 20-30% increase since 2018. Finally, before I give it to the colleagues of JBA, so obviously there are still a lot of challenges and gaps and technical issues, but also around the implementation, operation, and maintenance and around MBS. And what our global program aims to do is really provide the teams, the people who prepare the projects on the ground with the right tools, knowledge, and connections to experts so they can do these projects. So, for instance, if you go to naturebasedsolutions.org, you can find all these reports. But for instance, we have worked with the US Army Corps of Engineers and about 30 other partners on a 1,000-page engineering Bible for nature-based solutions. And we have these pictures that I showed you before are from this catalog of urban MBS for resilience to really, give a visual approach to people on like, okay, what do these solutions look like? How can they be integrated in my project? So that's just a quick snapshot. I think now we're gonna go to colleagues from JBA to talk about coastal ecosystems. Just on the slide, the starter from mangrove forest. So you can here see like a picture from the catalog on like the different processes that are being regulated by the forest. So it's this wave and storm surge reduction, but there is also a lot of other benefits. But yeah, I give it over to John now to talk about mostly the wave and storm surge reduction function, I guess. There you go.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Boris. Boris has introduced us. He's given a very nice introduction to... Thank you. That's much better. Okay. Boris has given us a very nice introduction to the work being done at GFDRR and in the global program to promote nature-based solutions through various programs across the World Bank. However, how do we understand and how do we evaluate where these are going to have the most benefit? How do we quantify the benefits of this, and how do we prioritize interventions from nature-based solutions across the other interventions from perhaps more grey infrastructure? So at JBA, we have a number of different models to help us do this. We have physical models, which we are going to demonstrate in just a second, and we also have analytical models, more numerical models, which we're going to explain in a second. So if I can just invite Joe up, and we are going to run you through a few examples of coastal wave inundation and some measures that we can use to reduce some of the wave overtopping.
Thanks, John. Okay, so yeah, as John said, at JBA, we do keep a number of physical models. These are really used for either educational purposes through our charitable wing of our organization called JBA Trust, but also we use them for demonstrating concepts to stakeholders and to people like you guys here. One of these models is the wave tank. So we use this to demonstrate the impact of coastal structures and coastal defenses on coastal flooding. So this could be hard defenses like engineered defenses and also nature-based solutions. So this is not actually the JBA wave tank. We have to say a massive thank you to Bruno Mellon and the team here who've constructed a replica of the wave tank that we have in the UK. Thanks also to Bruno because we were here on Saturday and Sunday before the conference to do some finishing touches just to make sure that it does what we need it to do. You'll see it's a little bit rough and ready in places, but it's good. It's doing the job, and it's enough to show what the concepts that we want to share with you today. So I will run you through how it works. And to run you through how it works, we will demonstrate like a base case scenario, sorry. Before I start, I think it would be useful to have a volunteer from the audience. We're going to ask you to keep an eye on this community here, the impact of flooding on this community, and to take some measurements of the flooding volume that happens when we start running the simulations. Do we have any volunteers? Or I'll ask John to go and do some right at the back there. Thank you very much. What's your name, sir? Pedro.
Nice to meet you. So what should I do?
Thank you. Okay, so for this base solution, I will use this thing to produce some waves. We'll do the same number of waves for every scenario. The waves will travel along the sea. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how much water overtops this flood defense into this community here. So you have to go with me a bit. So at the moment in the base solution, we have a really basic hard engineering defense. This is just a big concrete vertical sea wall. So nothing pretty, nothing special, a big concrete sea wall. So how's the community looking now? Looking okay? Yeah, are you okay to hold the...
Yes.
Okay. You might have to hold this while I've not done this one-handed before, so you have to excuse the microphone. Okay, I'm going to put 10 waves over the wall.
Eight, 9, 10.
Okay, so how's the community looking?
It's flooded.
Yeah, it's looking. We've got houses floating. There's quite a lot of water that I think you could see overtopping. Can you take the cork out and give us a measure?
So all we're going to do now is just measure how much water overtopped the sea defense, and it's not going to be too scientific, so bear with us. We're not going to have numerous decimal places, but this is really just as a way of doing a comparative assessment of some other measures that we'll show you in a second. So I wonder, Pedro, whether you'd be able to, let's just take a look at how much water is in there. And could you draw a line just with our baseline amount of water? So you can just scribble on the jug, just so we know roughly how much was there. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please put it back in.
Now we need to rebuild.
So we'll do some reconstruction, and while we're doing some reconstruction, obviously this is not ideal. Our community's been totally inundated. The houses are all over the place. We need to start looking at some alternative solutions to reduce the overtopping in our model. So I'm gonna give you 3 options. I'll talk through the options first, and then we're going to ask people to vote on what they think is going to be the most successful at reducing the overtopping. So your first option is another big engineering, concrete, heavy solution. It's we call it a stepped revetment. So you have to imagine this is essentially a concrete embankment. Instead of it being a flat slope, it's just a stepped structure. Like this. You don't have to imagine, you can look at this picture here. This is your option 1. Your second option, is an offshore reef. So I think, Brazil, you're quite lucky. You have one of these in, what is it called? Recife? Is it called Recife? Okay, so in the north of Brazil, I think you're from Recife. This might be quite biased then. So you're very lucky you have already a natural offshore reef in Recife. I will place it here. So this could be, if you're lucky, like Brazil, you have already a natural offshore reef. Otherwise, you can construct something. So maybe it's an engineered solution, or maybe you seed it with coral and it becomes more of a nature-based solution. So this is your option 2. I would place it here, an offshore reef. And your third option is mangroves. So if anyone has even, been to the beach or looked out the plane when they arrived here in Florianopolis, I think you've seen a lot of these. These I would place, hang on. This would go here. Is that okay? And these I would place here. So this is your third option for trying to reduce the overtopping of this wall to this community. Okay, so has anyone used Mentimeter before? Do we know how? Can everyone get your phones out of your pockets? if you go to www.menti.com, we'll give you a couple of minutes. Enter the code, which is quite small now. It's 36730086. And we should be able to see some votes coming in. And it's a good idea. The question we're being asked to answer is, which option is most effective against coastal flooding? We'll give you another 20 seconds to get some answers coming in. We are working with people from Florianopolis, I think, here, so I can understand the mangroves. Okay, thank you. So I don't think it's going to change a huge amount now, though feel free to keep putting your votes in. So we're going to start with option number 3, and we'll trial this, and then option number 2, and then option number 1. So you have three things that you need to help us with measuring here. So that's definitely back in. That's dry. Cork is in. Okay. Okay, I will install the step revetment. It's a two-handed job. Okay, so same as before, I'll put 10 waves over the top. You're keeping an eye on the community. Perfect.
Okay, we're going to put 10 waves down the tank now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're seeing some splashing here. Definite overtopping. 7, 8, 9. One more. 10. There you go. Very scientific. Okay, so yes, we're going to pull the plug out, and we're going to see how much water came across on the step revetment. So an engineered solution, very, very fashionable in the 80s. Popular in the UK, that's true, and Australia. So yeah, maybe we've got a little blockage of a building blocking our urban drainage here, so just bear with us. Okay, well, I think that's yeah, that's good. So what we'll do is, with that, we will take, we're going to go for a red, and we're going to say that this was the step revetment. Pedro, can you tell us how much in comparison do you think from the earlier case?
I think close to 150
Okay. How much?
milliliters.
Okay, so
Yeah,
So, yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4.
so much, yeah, much more, 50% more almost. 50% more we're seeing here with the engineer.
And this is possible because actually this step revetment is got quite a high gradient. And even though it has steps which help to dissipate some of the energy, it is pushing the waves up over the wall. So within the margin of error of our experiment, we were expecting it to be roughly the same or maybe even more. So this isn't impossible. What was your second option? Offshore reef. Okay. Can you take the mic while I put the reef in? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to remove the step revetment from the tank and then replace it with just the offshore reef. So we'll go back to just having the individual vertical seawall, but this time we're going to maybe have an offshore reef, so as you might see in Recife. Okay, we're going to run 10 more waves. This is all ready. Yeah, we've got a few buildings we need to stand up. It's a little bit wet still, but let's give it a go. Oh, reconstruction complete. Good to go. Off we go. 10 more. Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What do you think, Pedro? Is there much going on there?
No, almost nothing.
Almost nothing going on. We had a little bit of water already standing there, but we're just getting a few drips coming out the end. Looks like the reef did a pretty good job. So pretty good for everyone that's mentioned reef as number 2, but let's have a look to see what mangroves does next. So can we draw a line? Just about. It's negligible. Just, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Super. Oh, you're getting an expert at this. You could come and join us.
Okay, so the final option, mangroves, which was the clear winner. I'm going to take the reef out, replace it with the mangroves, and we'll go for round 3.
Another one. Okay, let's, any buildings to fix up here? It's per reconstruction. Okay, our final option now is planting some mangroves on the shore. And we're going to run another 10 waves down, same as before. Okay, here we go. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Keep an eye on the overtopping. 9, 10. Oh, that last one. There was a little bit going on in that last one.
My consistency of wave production is maybe a problem.
Okay. There. Okay, yes. Can we,
Okay, we'll do a measurement. Well, there's not a great deal to measure. Maybe it's. Is there any comparison with the reef, Pedro?
Almost the same or even lower than that.
The same or better than the reef. Okay. Okay.
Put a big, yeah, well, let's do this part. Just keep our standards up. Brilliant.
Okay, so you're quite accurate. In fact, maybe they're more similar than we think. Obviously, this is not very scientific, so probably they are essentially comparable, the mangroves and the offshore reef. What we will do now, because now we've compared 3 totally different options. As another experiment, we will start with Florianopolis. So this photograph I took over there yesterday in the 5 minutes it stopped raining. So this is a part of Florianopolis with no mangroves. So we will run the waves with just the beach. I will put a beach in a minute. And then we will ask you to vote on if we install some mangroves on the beach, how are we doing it? What percentage reduction in overtopping will we have? So if you put 10, you mean it's 100% reduction. And if you put 0, you mean it's exactly the same. The mangroves make no difference. Okay. So this is our beach, our base case. Should we run this? Okay, we'll run the beach while you continue to vote.
It's fine, yeah. So, okay, good to go here, yep. Well, 10 waves, yes. Let's go. And keep voting on Menti. 3, 4, 5, 6. We're getting some overtopping here from the beach. I lost count there, so roughly 10. But yeah, I think we've got a bit of inundation wave overtopping here. So let's just pull the cork out. And this is just going to be a 2-way comparison, but with the beach and then with the beach plus some mangroves. So while we're draining it at this end, we'll just put a line on the mark. It's actually coming up quite similar to the baseline, the first baseline, just the seawall by itself. So a very similar amount of water in the tank for that. Okay. Yeah? So maybe we can, we'll give it a little mark there. Maybe on the other side of the, we'll do it on this side for these comparisons. Okay, now we're going to introduce some mangroves. And if you voted, we're looking at, well, sort of 80% reduction. Oh, yeah, how's your math? We need to calculate what's 80% of 1 cup or whatever it says on this. Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
So what was it? 1 cup.
Yeah, 1 cup.
Okay, so we're expecting 20% of a cup. We're using imperial measures. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll put 10 waves over the mangroves with the beach.
Okay. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Again, another one at the end there. So we're just going to uncork this. And again, as with the last mangrove, we have only a few drips coming out the bottom. In fact, there's not even enough to cover the base. What do you think, Pedro?
Almost impossible. Yeah.
Maybe 1% of a cup. So yeah, very, very little. So what do we think, Joe? 80%? Would you say more than 80%? As 99%, okay. Well, I mean, don't quote us on the science. You're not going to see this in nature anytime soon. But hopefully it's a good way of giving you an indication of the comparative changes that some different interventions will have. So, Pedro, thank you very much for helping out. We'll let you go and sit down. Thanks very much. Give him a round of applause for Pedro. Okay, we're good to go back. Okay, so we're how are we doing for time? Okay, so hopefully the example there has given you a good idea of the impact that some nature-based solutions, whether a sort of reef environment or whether mangroves, have a significant impact on the volumes of water that overtop with waves. You can also consider that significant reduction, dissipation of wave energy and reduction of erosion and scar even on existing grey infrastructure. So we've basically given you the comparison of what we see on the slide here, the impact with the mangroves compared with the impact onshore without the mangroves. So this is all very nice. Hopefully we've enjoyed seeing the physical model, but then we have to think, well, actually, if we do want to quantify some of this, some of what we're seeing here in practice, how are we going to do that? And I'm going to just take you through a number of examples of some analytical models, some numeric models that we use, tools that we use to evidence the improvements that various interventions, nature-based solutions, will have. And this is an example of what we've just seen. This is a numeric tool, an open source piece of software called XBeach. We're working with the US Corps of Engineers and Deltares and others that have contributed to this open source community. And XBeach gives us a way of assessing the dissipation of waves, the change in energies that happen when water passes over a particular surface. We've taken some of the models that we've developed using XBeach and we've validated it in some field studies in Vietnam. We looked at mangroves there and we actually saw about a 60% reduction in energy coming to onshore over a space of about 100 meters of mangroves. Now, that it also, other tests have demonstrated in the models, have demonstrated about an 86% reduction in the amount of wave overtopping. So your 81% that you put up there is pretty close to what we've seen in our numeric models. I mean, our physical model, we got 99%-ish. So yeah, I think we can see that it has a significant impact, and we've got some, we're able to quantify this through some of these numeric tools. Taking this a step further, we've also got to consider that, this isn't, coastal areas aren't static, they're very dynamic areas. We see a lot of change in the coastal regions, change in shoreline position, change in the movement of sediments. And we're able to use historic satellite data through, again, some open source software called CoastSat. And we're able to look back at the archive of existing satellite imagery to see what was the shape of the shore, what was the shoreline position over time, and also help us understand any other coastal processes, longitudinal processes for movements of sediment, etc. We can expand on this and we can look at further into the archive with looking at other sources of imagery, such as Landsat or even radar-based satellite data. So And putting these together, really what the analytics do is help us evaluate options and help us evaluate the impact and the cost benefit of how these options can be put together. So here's an example where we've done our shoreline inundation in Suriname, so just up the coast a little bit, quite a long way up the coast. But we were able to look at the shoreline position and the dynamic processes of sediment coming out of the Amazon and the impacts on flood risk in the capital of Suriname in Paramaribo. So we put together our numeric models, our other pieces of information, and use those then to come up with a portfolio of measures. So in Paramaribo, we looked at restoration of the coastal mangrove in the area, also joining up with some floodplain restoration. So we've got some inland NBS going on here, as well as some non-structural elements like evacuation zones and protected areas. And so you can start to see how each of these sort of layer up to have a overall significant benefit on the population at risk. Now, moving at zooming out a little bit further still, we have developed tools with the ADB and with other organizations to integrate a number of these nature-based solutions with other interventions. So we can look at the impact of NBS, we can look at the impact of grey defences and embankments, etc. What is the impact of adding flood warning areas and also property level resilience? So putting up individual barriers and ways of protecting individual homes. And this allows us through we have a global probabilistic modeling tool called FLY. It allows us to augment some of the vulnerability characteristics that we're using in FLY. We can adjust some of the damage, when damage is going to occur based on property level resilience. We can adjust the friction in our numeric models when there are mangroves put in a particular area. So by layering all of this up, we're able to kind of get a wider view of where some of these options could be put together. So this is an example in Pakistan, in Sindh province, and we have developed these optioneering maps. So these maps are opportunity maps, and these maps show the opportunities of new plantation of mangrove or enhancement of existing mangrove areas. We base a lot of this on satellite observations of the current trend, but then we use the future scenarios. We modify roughness, etc., to simulate that new areas have been planted. And all of the analytics doing that sits behind sort of a dashboard tool that decision makers can use to support their decision making. And really, we don't have time to go through all of this, but I'll just very quickly say that we're probabilistically modeling this in the back end. We've got a number of different measures that we can turn up the dial on to say, well, based on the priority of benefit areas, let's add some defenses, let's add some mangroves and other options. And what we should look at here is our baseline loss, so expressed as annual average loss, looking at the baseline and then looking at the comparative risk measure when we implement some of these measures. So this is just pure baseline existing standards, no additional NBS. But we can then start to turn up the dial, and let's just put mangroves all the way up to 10. Zooming in a little bit more, we're able to sort of implement other measures. So here's just adding property level protection in all over the place. We see a little bit of a reduction in the annual average loss. But then if we combine these measures and we shift our dials, perhaps it's for budgetary reasons, or perhaps it's just to test budget scenarios, where you're able to then use the tool to basically test various scenarios of interventions of investment. And overall, we can see then we can quantify the change, and we can see whether that combination of scenarios is enough to meet the requirements of the end users to reduce flood risk by a particular proportion. So I'm going to hand back to Boris. Thank you for this part of the session, for the modeling part of the session and analytics. Boris, do you want to tell us how this goes in practice?
Absolutely. Thank you, John, Joe. That was really great. I hope you guys are willing to stick around for a little bit now. The fun stuff is over. So yeah, basically, I want to have the last 10 minutes or something. We can talk a little bit about nature-based solutions in urban catchment. So a slightly different context, and with one World Bank project example. So a project that has been implemented over recent years. So first the basics. So basically, what you see when kind of a non-developed area is urbanizing, you see, of course, that there is an increase in impervious surfaces, and that leads to a whole change in the hydrology of the system. No, so you have less infiltration, more and faster runoff, and that in many places can lead to flash flooding when there is intense rainfall. You know, as we have experienced today. So luckily we have dry feet, but if you would live down there, maybe there would be some flooding occurring. So that's just your basic idea. So what you can do is to work with combining the green measures with the existing drainage or improving the existing drainage system to make sure that you can reduce the chance of flooding and the impacts of flooding in the city. So some pictures from the catalog. So just a few types of solutions that we find, right? So sometimes it's worth reforesting or protecting certain areas that are forested in cities in a strategic way to make sure that they maintain their function of infiltration, recharging the aquifers, and thereby, you know, reducing the runoff. There are also other types of solutions, for instance, bioretention areas that have a bit of a different function, and often they have some gray infrastructure integrated in there, by also bringing biodiversity into areas that maybe had no biodiversity before. Or, for example, other type of solutions that you can often see in urban areas is more like the renaturation of existing streams that were maybe hardened before and straightened in previous years, and then kind of bring back some natural vegetation along the shores to increase kind of the buffer capacity and also the infiltration in the riparian areas along the stream. So those are just a few examples. This is a picture from some work we did with the bank in Kigali, and just to show that it's really important to integrate and to look at the city level on how these measures work together. You know, so both the green measures and the gray measures and how they work together as a system. So not to evaluate them just one by one. So this is actually Catalina's presentation. So the one who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but I tried to tell you a little bit about the project that she works on. So this is a picture from about Buenos Aires. So the city of Buenos Aires has a kind of a flood management plan that has been developed about 15 years ago, which already had kind of the key priorities in terms of investing in flood risk reduction. But of course, since then, the climate is also changing, rainfall patterns are changing, which has also is also impacting flood risk in the city. So the city of Buenos Aires has worked together with the World Bank and with the city of Copenhagen to explore, like, okay, how can we work more with nature-based solutions? And they have decided to focus specifically on the Sildañez watershed catchment, if I pronounce it well, which is kind of the biggest. The catchment covers about 80% of the city of Buenos Aires, and especially that part has been heavily urbanized since the 19th century. So it's like this first picture that I showed you about the catchment. You know, it has gone from like pervious surfaces to impervious surfaces, increasing a lot the runoff, and that combined with the increasing intensity of rainfall, it leads to a lot of problems. So if we go to the next slide, flood risk assessment has showed that there is the need to create more water storage capacity, and they identified this Parque Indo-Americano as a good site to develop a water retention area, water storage area, to reduce flooding downstream, to complement the existing drainage infrastructure in the catchment. So this flood storage area it's about, here you can see it. So it's the green area on the slide, and it's about 7 hectares big, and it's meant to, provide sufficient storage capacity for most intense rainfall events in the catchment. So just as an indication, they estimated that in a 10-year event, the water level in the retention area, in the storage area, would rise with 1.4 meters. So it would have like sufficient capacity to store this. But then the pandemic happened. So this is what it looks like when it's filled with water. But then the pandemic happened. So initially the area was designed together with the community. So there were community consultations. So like, okay, how are we going to use this water storage area when it's not flooded, right? So initially, everybody said, no, we want to use it as a public space to play football, to play soccer. So there were like pumps installed and the drainage system, etc., to, when there is no flooding, that they would like drain the area and that it would be suitable for use as a football pitch. But then the pandemic happened and maintenance was a bit disregarded. No one was playing football, and the pumps broke down, and it kind of naturally transformed into this area as you see it right now. So Catalina can probably tell you this much better, but they actually got a lot of positive responses from the community about this change, and now they're actually working with the city to make this area better accessible for recreation as well, and they would like to keep it this way. So yeah, that's the story of this retention area in the Parque Indo-Americano in Buenos Aires, part of a World Bank project that I wanted to share with you to close this session. So I think we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes for questions regarding this presentation or the earlier presentation to JBA before we wrap up. So if there's any burning question.
Mangroves need a specific ecosystem to grow. Implanting mangroves in areas where other ecosystems exist could it generate a serious ecological imbalance. For example, Brazilian law prevents the modification of ecosystems such as beaches, considering such modifications an environmental crime.
Shall I make a start? Okay, yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, of course, I'm very happy that you make the point, because of course, we cannot do mangrove restoration everywhere. That is definitely not desirable. And unfortunately, we see also that there are quite a lot of malpractices in mangrove restoration, mostly because indeed of lack of understanding of these coastal systems. By restoring mangroves in areas where they have never grown before or where it's not a good habitat. So yeah, indeed, that is a very important consideration. I don't know if you would like to add anything to that.
Well, just going back to the analytics side of things, we are able to sort of mask out various areas that have got restrictions on them, either an ecological restriction or a legal restriction. And that's the purpose of having this sort of the opportunity maps that sit behind the analytics. So being able to understand not only where the mangroves are going to have the most protective value, but then where they cannot be or should not be. We were able to layer all that in and take it into account. So, I think it's a very good point. Thanks.
Hi, Eduardo Rainier Blanchett from World Bank, senior Deer specialist, working actually on this wetland policy for Honduras with the government, and so I'm very interested in the practical details of it. And one question that rises from your presentation is the timeline for having this green infrastructure happen. So if I'm the mayor of, I don't know, like Recife, for instance, I'm in a political cycle, right? So I have like 4 years basically to show results. So I'd have to choose between a reef, which is gonna happen in maybe 1 or 2 years maximum, and regenerating my coral reef or my mangrove, which is going to take 5 to 10 years. So I have no incentive politically to go for it. I would rather show concrete results, literally concrete results with this reef. So do you face this kind of question with your decision-making people in your project and your demonstration?
Yeah, thanks, Eduardo. I can make a start again, maybe. Yeah, no, that's of course. I mean, it's inevitably the case that it takes longer for natural systems to regrow, especially when you work with restoration. So, for example, I worked on this large-scale mangrove restoration project of the World Bank in Indonesia, where they're going to restore. The World Bank is financing the restoration of 100,000 hectares of mangroves. And for that, of course, in all the analytics, we had to consider that, it takes like 20 to 30 years for these mangroves to regrow, and also that there is a chance of failure of the restoration in some locations. So that is definitely the case. At the same time, I think that from a political point of view, that doesn't have to be. These projects are not necessarily unsellable. I think there are a lot of other benefits that come with them that can also have a lot of positive aspects to them as well. Like, for example, the ability to work potentially with carbon financing, or the ability to bring other benefits to the community. But yeah, it's definitely a more integrated perspective. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Thaisa. I work for a project called Tomorrow Cities, and we also think a lot about the future. And a big concern for us is how to incorporate nature and green infrastructure into those future solutions. So I have, one of my questions was about the conditions under which these solutions could be implemented. So whether you have like a topology of solutions and a reflection about both the budgetary and the environmental conditions that would allow these solutions to work. And my second question is about how these solutions play out in context, particularly in the context of the global South, where we have settlements with high density, and even in areas that still have a lot of nature to build upon, these areas are expected to grow and to become dense. So I don't know if you have any reflections on how those projections of population growth, density, and urban expansion in general, how they are dealt with in your models, and what are the possible solutions that we can come up with. And just to give you an example, for example, if I think of the renaturalization of a stream in an informal settlement, this would entail, for example, negotiating evictions with communities. So it's a very tricky subject when you're actually when you need to think of this in terms of trade-offs. So I was just wondering if you have any reflections in that sense, and yeah, that would be very useful for us. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, it's a very difficult topic to model, but we do have ways of projecting not only a change in the hazard, so changes in climate, on wave heights or on river flows, but then also changes in the exposure. So we can estimate where population would likely move to, formally or informally, either through urban planning, or also looking at sort of projections in areas where informal settlements would typically be, where people would go. I suppose the reflection from a project I worked on in Dar es Salaam is, we saw sort of firsthand the impacts on the fluvial geomorphology due to people deforesting, taking out vegetation because the influx of people into Dar es Salaam was so significant. So people were using wood for construction and for fuel, etc. But it had a massive impact on the fluvial, on the erosion of the sediment, which then ended up in the river, which then silted up the river and had a massive impact in the urban flood risk downstream. So what we were looking at doing was trying to inform ways of dealing with issues further upstream that have an impact on really exposed people downstream. So there were urban parks being designed in the lower part of the basin, but also in the urban planning they had to consider what was happening further upstream, because that really had a contributing factor. So I'm not sure whether that was helpful or whether. Boris.
Maybe just to add one thing on I think the first part of your question on like how do we basically catalog these solutions, right? So maybe it would be worthwhile to have a look at this catalog of nature-based solutions for urban resilience. So that is like a way to we identify like 14 main typologies, and for each typology we kind of try to describe like what are the physical constraints to implementation, like do you need the slope or what, and also like what are the general considerations for costs and benefits, like how do you generally integrate them in the urban fabric and these kind of things. So we try to make a very practical tool to kind of get started thinking about like what could work where. So maybe that's worthwhile to have a look. Okay, fine. We can take a few more questions. I see one in the back there, and then I see two here. Yeah, and then I think we wrap up.
I will make mine quick. Thank you. My name is Scott Denish. I'm the wildfire response coordinator for the U.S. Agency for International Development. So all of my work, of course, involves wildfires and post-wildfire work, which is where my question is here. We find that many of these solutions, these nature-based solutions and person-made solutions, that while we build them for resilience to make communities more resilient, when those are built and there's no plan for those themselves being resilient. Again, we're looking at a post-wildfire. Recently, whether the fire we're talking about wildfire on the hills of São Paulo, or we're talking about in Portugal outside of Lisbon, when those areas are burned, we find that debris flow and many of the things that were being relied on to help clean that water for the water supply or for the streams are then are gone. We have a sudden change in landscape, especially in areas that have relief. Has any of those ideas or any of those problems been worked on by I guess in your work, in your consulting work, or in the World Bank's work, in looking at how do we kind of solve that problem? I mean, one of the things USAID helps do is looking is burned area emergency assessments and providing temporary relief. But part of the idea is if you have a nature-based solution, say forested hills or mangrove, but those burn, is there a tension pond then to help catch that debris? Because we're finding in Portugal, for example, one of the areas set at the Stella National Park in the center of the country was a water source for Lisbon. Well, when that burned this year, that we're finding that many of the town villages below are just decimated by floods because there's no retention ponds to catch the debris. And they always have floods, and they were built to withstand floods, and they do well, except when there's debris involved. And then the water goes everywhere other than when it's supposed to. I guess my question is, has those analytics come into any of your consulting work? Thank you.
Great question. I think the short answer is not explicitly, we haven't been involved in something that is as integrated and considering the multiple hazards as something like that. But I think it demonstrates a real requirement to understand the stakeholders involved, and it's not just the stakeholders involved in the peril that you're modeling or you're providing options for. at an early stage in the project. So there's some work that we've been doing in Panama City to try and protect one of the basins in and around the international airport. And there are significant changes in the upper parts of the catchment, in the forested areas that are massive deforestation there. So I think there were options that we have put forward to retain or to reinvigorate those as areas, but I think they need further elaboration and confirmation. I think when you bring in other stakeholders and for other perils. So great question, but I think it demonstrates some current deficiencies in the stakeholder engagement process.
Yes, thank you. Sherry James, Director, National Office of Disaster Services, Antigua and Barbuda. I was wondering, based on the examples that you set here, have you had a chance to basically utilize this in, for example, a small island developing state setting where you have a very densely built up area in terms of the majority of the population living in very concentrated areas? You have critical, historical, cultural sites, which then limits your ability to do certain things in certain areas. And for example, if tourism is the mainstay, then the interaction with these things becomes so much more of a challenge. So I was just wondering if y'all had a chance to experience that and what modalities of engagement and development were put forward.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think that relates a lot to like also that slide that we showed earlier about integrating green and gray. So I think a lot of I've worked a lot in small island states, like across the Caribbean, also in Seychelles and Mauritius, and in those places you see indeed often that there's just a lack of space in a narrow coastal strip, right, to do work with large-scale nature-based solutions. So it's really like, yeah, we really like to think of that as like work with green when you can and work with gray when you must. So there is like sometimes there is no other option. And also it's really important, as you said, to consider the ecosystem services that are important for the tourist. So if tourism is really sustained by conserving your beaches and then maybe it is a good opportunity to think about beach and dune renaturation or restoration or protection, strategic protection, so you maintain both the buffer function and the natural cycle of the beach to protect the coast and the function for tourism. So yes, if you want, I can share some examples with you of these kind of more strategic plans for small island states after the session. Maybe last question.
Yes. Hello, I'm Vitória from Defesa Civil de Petrópolis at Rio de Janeiro. I don't know if you have seen in the beginning of the year we have a lot of events of floods, but we are not at the coast of the country. We are not at the flat areas. We are at the mountains, and we have this problem. And I think my question is, if you research something about nature solutions, about floods in the mountains at the upper area of the river, and if you can, I really like to know. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know if my English is
No, it was
enough.
very clear. It was very clear.
Okay.
We were just negotiating on who would answer your question. Yes, we've happened to have talked more about coastal nature-based solutions because we happen to have this equipment with us. Another bit of equipment that we thought of bringing was, well, I won't describe the equipment, but we were going to talk more about nature-based solutions that work more in mountainous areas and catchments that are not coastal. So in that kind of area, for example, you could do things like retention ponds or offline storage or reconnecting the river to the floodplain. This kind of thing that I'm sure that they are covered in all of these books. It was the reason we were talking about coastal areas was just a function of the equipment we had with us today. I don't know if you want to talk specifically about any.
maybe just to mention that is a very good question, and that is actually something that from our work with the global program in the World Bank, we're a topic that we're currently working on building capacity to kind of develop the right tools to be able to do that. Also for like, for example, landslide caused by glacier melt or like by heavy rain in the mountains. So there are several projects that we have where they work with revegetation of slopes. Right now, we're working on a project in Central Asia which has exactly this objective. So in the high mountain areas. So yeah, that's what we're working on, and I'm also happy to after the session to have a quick chat and show you some examples.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we wrap up there. You want to? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming here with so many of you. I hope you had a nice session and that you enjoyed it, the live demo and the presentations. Yeah, we're all happy, I think, to talk more after and answer more questions if there are any left. For now, I would like to really thank a lot the JBA team for contributing and doing this amazing demonstration. And yeah, that's maybe we close here and go home and do more nature-based solutions, I would say. So.